In our last video, we explored the causes and impacts of drought in Canada, in particular, the impacts of drought on our agricultural system. Now it's time to consider the reverse. Does our food system impact drought? And if so, what can we do about it? If you missed our first video, be sure to check it out here before watching this one. For those who have already watched it, let's jump right into the video. Some aspects of our agricultural food system require vast amounts of water despite not being necessary to meet the caloric needs of our global population. Let's start by examining the issues associated with an obvious inefficiency, food waste, and how it impacts drought. Food waste and loss occurs when food that is grown that is not eaten for various reasons. About 80% of food loss happens within the production chain, whether accidentally during processing or through deliberate overproduction and discarding of food that doesn't look perfect. Consumers and retailers also contribute to the problem. Deals at the grocery store prompt consumers to buy more food than they can consume. These marketing ploys drive food waste because very few people actually need that second head of broccoli or loaf of bread. And while hunger and poverty are rampant social issues, many people are privileged enough to have food make up a small part of their budget. So they aren't concerned about overspending on and ultimately wasting food. They may not even notice it happening. To make matters worse, best before dates are often misinterpreted to be a health or quality standard, when in reality it's a date set by companies as a general guideline for when they believe the food will taste best, meaning food can be safe and tasty to consume after the printed date. These dates regularly confuse consumers like us, misleading us to throw out food that is still safe to eat. We are all familiar with that guilty feeling of opening the refrigerator to find some mushy tomatoes, soured yogurt, or dodgy chicken on the back shelf. And while it can seem like an apple wasted here and a carrot wasted there isn't that big of a problem, collectively, a whopping 58% of all food produced in Canada is lost or wasted each year. This staggering amount of food wasted could feed every Canadian for 5 months. But what has this got to do with drought? Well, when food is wasted, we also waste all of the resources that went into producing it, including the energy, land, and water. And while drought is primarily driven by low rain or snowfall over long periods of time, the problem becomes more serious when there is also a high demand for the water left in the system. Imagine a bathtub full of water with the tap slowly dribbling more water into it. When you pull the plug in the bath, the water inside drains faster than the tap fills it. Within a few seconds, the bath is completely empty. In this example, the plug hole draining the water represents intensive agricultural practices, combined with all the other human needs for water like our homes, business, and industry. The bath runs dry very quickly, just like how drawing water from lakes and rivers for agriculture during a drought can dry up the land. This problem is quickly becoming a reality across the world. In fact, human consumption of water has doubled in the past 50 years. In short, water-intensive agricultural activities can cause bad drought conditions to worsen quickly. When drought conditions set in, the primary objective of many governments is to protect food supply. This often means that water is drained from local rivers, killing the ecosystem, pulled from groundwater reservoirs, damaging long-term water supplies, or diverted from local communities and indigenous lands, affecting those already marginalized by social and environmental issues. With over 70% of freshwater used for agriculture and over half of food produced globally being wasted, this means we are threatening our water supply, the health of the local ecosystem, and our communities for something we don't benefit from. To make matters worse, all of this wasted and lost food ends up in landfills where it rots and produces methane, a greenhouse gas that is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. All of this gas accelerates climate change, creating more unstable weather conditions, including drought and flooding, which in turn wipes out crops and causes soil erosion, making agriculture more challenging. We are stuck in a vicious cycle where our food system drives climate change and climate change hinders our food system. Speaking of agricultural practices that drive climate change, let's look at the impacts of animal agriculture on drought. Animal agriculture refers to the practice of breeding animals for the production of animal products for consumption, including meat, poultry and seafood, and byproducts like eggs and dairy. Although our modern world has normalized diets heavily focused on animal products, this mass consumption of animals at every meal is a recent trend. In fact, meat consumption has quadrupled in the past 60 years, while the human population has only doubled, meaning more people are eating larger quantities of meat, eggs, and dairy than ever before. And this demand is expected to continue to rise in the coming decades. While it's great that more humans have the ability to meet their cultural and personal dietary preferences, this massive surge in demand means we are producing animal products on a scale that has immense social, environmental, and health consequences. Animal agriculture requires a significant amount of resources. Land is used to grow crops, which are then fed to animals. This doesn't sound that destructive until you consider that livestock, animals raised for food, eat more calories than they produce for humans. Let's break this down. Most of the calories fed to an animal are burned up for their metabolism, meaning it's converted into the energy they need to stay alive. Because of this energy loss, farmers must feed their animals more food, such as corn and other grains, than the animal will ever produce for humans. We call this a calorie negative process. More calories go in than we get out. To make matters worse, the energy loss, or the food wasted, in raising an animal can be as high as 96% for products such as beef. But what impact does this inefficient process really have on the world and on drought? We see this inefficiency reflected in the resources used. A staggering 50% of the usable land on Earth is dedicated to agriculture, in particular to grow feed for livestock, which requires a lot of water. It is estimated that annually, 4,387 cubic kilometers of water is used to create animal feed, equaling about 41% of total water use in agriculture. This does not consider the water needed to create supplies like fertilizer or needed for animals to drink. Cows, for example, drink up to 30 gallons of water a day. That's equivalent to 60 mason jars of water. As with food waste and loss, high water demands for animal agriculture add pressure to water supplies that may already be in drought status. This imbalance in supply and demand for water has severe consequences on local ecosystems and communities, and is expected to worsen as the demand for meat continues to increase with the global population. Animal agriculture is also a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. A study published in Nature Food in 2021 stated that livestock and the crops needed to feed them were responsible for 57% of all food production emissions. In turn, these emissions drive climate change, which increases the likelihood and severity of drought, which makes it more difficult to produce food and ensures food security. So what can be done about the negative interactions between our food system and drought? Is disaster inevitable? The first thing to know is that there is a great deal of opportunity. We have much of the knowledge, innovation, and technologies needed to address, mitigate, and adapt to drought. The focus now needs to be on implementation. The first thing we need to do is get to the root cause of the problem. We know that human activity dramatically exacerbates drought based on our water use and greenhouse gas emissions. Though agriculture is essential for feeding the world's population, we can dramatically reduce the negative impacts of the sector through optimization and innovation. We are also finding ways to adapt to the changing climate as we continue to implement mitigation strategies. Researchers have the capability to predict how different regions and climates will be affected by drought, and can calculate the probability that drought will hit that area. This is useful in adaptation planning, which is a great strategy in preparing and prioritizing actions that prevent worst-case scenarios. Such drought risk assessments should be mandated as essential by the federal government as a way to preemptively support and protect food production across the country. For many of us who have sinks that reliably produce water, drought can seem like a problem only felt by those in faraway nations. But the reality is we all are intrinsically tied to our water system and need to work to protect it. This can be reflected in our individual, community, and country's actions. We all have the ability and opportunity to make changes that have an impact. We can take steps to eat a climate-friendly and water-efficient diet by reducing our consumption of meat and dairy products, limiting food waste at home, and supporting innovative technologies like cultivated meat. National and international policies need to be put in place to regulate food systems to limit water dependence and insecurity in times of drought. For more tips on how to eat a climate-friendly diet, reduce your food waste, or get involved with our Cultivated Meat campaign, check out our guide in the description. Drought is scary, but we have the technology and expertise to mitigate its causes and adapt to its impacts. We can create sustainable food security for current and future generations. Thanks for watching our series on drought. Reimagine Agriculture is a nonprofit organization working to transform the food system. You can support our work by directly donating via the link in the description. You can also support our work by liking this video, leaving a comment, or sharing it with your friends and family. Be sure to sign up to our newsletter and follow our social media accounts linked in the description. And of course, check out the next video of this series here.